Barry White is also known as the maestro of love. He had a career that most people in the music industry can only dream of. He became an international star with 106 gold and 41 platinum albums, 20 gold and 10 platinum singles, 2 Grammys, and over 100 million worldwide records sold. Barry had one of the sexiest voices in the industry, and he was the man. Welcome to the House of Nostalgia, and on this channel, we discuss musical artists, actors, authors, sports figures, people that seem to give us a nostalgic feeling whenever we hear their name. If you like this type of content, please feel free to subscribe and give us a like. I would truly appreciate it. Barry Eugene Carter was born in Galveston, Texas in 1944. His father, Melvin White, was already a married man, which he kept a secret from Barry's mother, Sadie Carter. Barry and his mother moved to Los Angeles and settled in Watts. She eventually had another son named Daryl. Barry started showing signs of his musical talent as a child, and his mother noticed this and encouraged him by buying him a piano. He wasn't professionally trained or anything like that, but he did have natural talent. He started performing in church, and by the age of 14, his voice changed and became very deep. It seemed to happen almost overnight. And although he had this musical talent, he really didn't seem to hold any interest in taking it any further than playing in the church. And by the age of 16, he did a 4-month stint in jail for theft. This is when he decided to make a change in his life and pursue a career in music. In the early 60s, he started performing with different groups, but in the mid-60s, he was hired by Rob King, who owned King Records, to be an A&R person for his Mustang and Broncos label. Barry didn't know what an A&R person was at first, but King told him to, quote, worry about it after you get the job, end quote. Barry became very helpful in this field, and he was learning a lot about the music industry. He was instrumental in suggesting that the group, the Versatiles, change their name, and they did, to the Fifth Dimension. And as we know now, the Fifth Dimension became a very successful group in the early 70s. And Marilyn McCoo and her husband, Billy Davis Jr., left the group and became superstars performing together. He also discovered the talent of Miss Viola Wills and helped her get a top 20 hit with the song Lost Without the Love of My Guy. Now, you know I went right on over to YouTube to hear this song, and since it was recorded around the mid-60s, it had a sort of doo-wop sound. And Viola had a beautiful voice. I could see this song charting. He started working with Bobby Fuller, and he coined 3 hits with Felice Taylor. It May Be Winter Outside, I'm Under Your Spell, and I Feel Love Coming On. Barry went from making $60 a week to $400 a week in 1967. He was married and the father of 4 children at this time, and his talent as a songwriter and arranger was getting around the industry. And I'm pretty sure that even though $400 a week was good, he knew he was worth more. So he went into business with Larry Nunes and started working on a concept album for a girl group that ended up becoming the Love Unlimited album, with the mega hit Walking in the Rain with the One I Love. And this was in 1972. This record was inspired by DOIN, who was a member of the group and later became his second wife. Now, DOIN was the first person that I ever seen with these long claw nails that is popular today. And this was in the early 70s, so we have to give that to her because that didn't catch on back then, but it's all the rage now. The second album was the start of Barry's singing career. He never intended to sing. He felt that he would be better as a piano player, writer, and arranger. He recorded a song earlier in his career, but he had to sort of be talked into recording this album. So in 1973, he recorded his first album, I Got So Much Love to Give, which was the title track, and it was a hit. And I'm Gonna Love You Just a Little Bit More was a bigger hit. His next album was Stone Gone with the hit Never Never Gonna Give You Up. And his third album, Can't Get Enough, is one of my favorites that I was introduced to later in life. And it's one of those albums that you just let play. It have the hit songs Can't Get Enough of Your Love and You're My First, My Last, My Everything. I love that album. 1974 was a busy year for Berry. He married his second wife, DOIN, and recorded 3 albums that year, starting with Can't Get Enough and an instrumental album, Rhapsody in White, with a 40-piece string orchestra. Now you know, his record label didn't want him to do that, but he did, and to the surprise of everybody, it was a hit. Love's Theme off the album shot to #1 on Billboard, and this song was considered a pop record. There was a few artists that played in this orchestra before they found fame on their own, like Kenny G and Ray Parker Jr., David T. Walker, and Ernie Watts. Ernie Watts played and toured with the Rolling Stones and Frank Zappa. And as we know, Ray Parker Jr. eventually had his own group called Radio. And of course, he became a huge success. And a lot of more artists who played in this orchestra became successful over the course of time that he kept it going. And that was until 1983. Now, this album was what made him an international artist. This made people stand up and take notice of Berry's talent. He walked right in on the buildup of the disco movement, and this album, Love's Theme, fit perfect in that genre. This was very impressive, you know. If any of you all don't remember Berry's earlier music, I suggest that you listen to it again because that's what I did while making this video, and it brought back a lot of good memories for me. His third album that year was a soundtrack to the motion picture Together Brothers. In 1975, he recorded another instrumental album with the Love Unlimited Orchestra called Music Maestro Please. And I believe that is when they started calling him the Maestro of Love, because I didn't read that anywhere, but I do remember hearing them say that back in the day. He recorded Just Another Way to Say I Love You in 1975, and it had a couple of memorable hits. He had 2 albums in 1976 titled Let the Music Play and What You Want Now. There was no denying Berry's talent, but you're going to have your hits and misses, and What You Want Now was a miss for me. This album kind of gave me the feeling that it was time for a change in his music, and that is exactly what he did for his 10th album. The 1977 Berry Sings for Someone You Love. This whole album was full of hits, every song. He didn't just abandon the whole sound completely, but there was a big change. Over the Night for Dancing was one of the most sexiest songs to me. It hit hard, and even though his music was sexy, it was very tasteful and classy, not like what you hear today. These artists don't even know what sexy is today. Berry recorded 4 more albums after the Berry Sings for Someone You Love LP. And you could hear in his music that he was showing signs of exhaustion in his performance. Berry had been recording nonstop basically since he started with I Got So Much Love to Give in 1973. He moved right on into the 80s with the album Sheet Music. But for the first time in years, he only made that one album for 1980 and came back in 1981 with a collaboration album with his wife called Berry and DOIN. Now this was a good album. But people was not that interested in sharing Berry's voice with Glodine in a whole album. And right after that, he was right back at it with two more albums. In 1981, he released Beware and Let 'Em Dance. Now, it was something about these three albums that just wasn't hitting for me, mainly because it was a lot going on in Berry's career at the time. He had a huge record deal to fall through with CBS. And of course, music completely changed in the 80s. After years of making hit after hit, when the hits was not coming as often, you have to prove yourself all over again because the early hits don't count anymore. Berry had 4 more albums in the 80s, and he seemed to slow down a lot. He recorded Change in 1982 and Dedicated in 1983. He even waited 4 years before he recorded The Right Night in Barry White in 87. Another thing, when I listened to some of these songs off these albums to see if I was familiar with any of them, the sound of the 80s synthesizers, which was a whole lot different from the 40-piece orchestra that we was used to listening to. And this wasn't for the better, but I do understand why he had to dismantle that orchestra. In 89, he recorded I'm Back, but it was his 1991 album, Put Me in Your Mix, that I really enjoyed listening to. It sort of brought back the old Berry from the 70s. He also had a duet with Isaac Hayes with the song Dark and Lovely You Over There. Isaac and Berry were pitted against each other earlier in their careers because of their voices, but they were good friends. Berry seemed to have a lot of friends in the industry. He was old school and he believed in honoring what you say. He seemed to be a good guy from what I learned about him while making this video. Berry's 1994 album, The Icon Is Love, is another one of my favorites with the classic hit Practice What You Preach. After the radio stopped playing that song, places like juke joints and hole in the walls kept that song going for years. And I know because I've been in plenty of them from state to state. And that's the truth. And another one of my favorites on the album was Baby's Home. His last recording album was 1999's Staying Power. And that title fit perfectly because he was still recording hits. And he started as an A&R in the 60s. I enjoyed his 90s music a little bit more than his 80s music, and that's just my opinion. I just didn't get the feeling that he was comfortable with the 80s style of music, but the 90s was different for him. And who can forget the Lisa Stansfield 1989 song All Around the World when he recorded it with her in 1992? He had a love for Britain and the British people. They supported his music heavily. And he performed there many times, even when earlier in his career, he was told not to because it would be too expensive. Berry also recorded for Quincy Jones in 1989 for My Secret Garden, which was on the Back on the Block album. All this talent and originality in this man that you just don't see today. Even if it was somebody with this much talent today, would they be as successful without the quote-unquote aesthetics that's going on now? Could they even make it 30 years? I don't know. Barry White's health started failing him due to his heavy smoking, diabetes, and high blood pressure, and I wouldn't doubt work overload. He passed away at the age of 58 on the 4th of July in 2003. He was the father of 9 children, 4 by his first wife, Mary, and 4 by his second wife, Glodine. I was surprised that him and Glodine had 4 children together. I remember reading years ago that they had a child, but I never heard about 3 more. Glodine and Berry had been separated since 1988, but they never divorced. And he died without a will, which later brought on a lot of problems and lawsuits for his wife. My take on it is that he wanted to leave everything to his wife because if he wanted to divorce her, he could have filed without even leaving his home. And if he still didn't love her, he would have tried to give her as little as possible. Unfortunately, by him not leaving a will, it brought on a lot of, as what I would call, entitlement. I really appreciate all of you guys for watching my videos. I really do. And I thank you so much for watching this video on Mr. Barry White.